Hello and welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I am Michael Pinter, where I teach you how to start flipping and wholesaling houses, or if you're already doing it, how to grow your business. So today we're talking about how to wholesale REO properties. First, let's talk about what an REO property is, and then if you stay to the end, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to really wholesale them. But I'll talk to you about how the whole process works so you understand. So REO stands for real estate owned, and what it means is that a bank owns a property. Now, how do banks get to own properties? Almost all the time, it's because they had a loan on it, a first mortgage, and they foreclosed on that mortgage. So let's talk about what happens in the foreclosure process, and then let's talk about how the bank owns it. So the foreclosure process in New York is a very long one. It can take as many as 10 years. I know it sounds nuts. When you talk to people in Texas where it takes like 45 days, they can't even believe it, but it could take as long as 10 years in New York, sometimes longer, 15 years. Uncontested, it could take, 4 or 5 years. So it's pretty nuts. But what happens is there's an entire foreclosure process that goes through the court system. And then when it gets to the end, it is after there's a judgment for foreclosure, then it gets a sale date where it goes to the auction, right? And I went to the auction every Tuesday for 4 years in Nassau, and I can tell you there's stuff there that's been lying around for years. So once there's a sale date, what happens at the auction is the lender, or in this case the plaintiff, picks a minimum amount that they want, an upset price. Now, as crazy as it sounds, it's not always based on what they're owed. Sometimes people are owed a crazy amount of money, and they'll take a much lower amount. Sometimes they're owed a low amount and they want more. Every lender is different, and it's very hard to know these things, which is why I stopped going to the auctions, because I was spending a lot of time doing research on properties that I couldn't even buy because the lender's upset price was more than I wanted to pay. So the lender picks an upset price, and very often, I wish I knew the percentage, but could be half the time, no one bids on it, and it just goes back to the plaintiff, which means it becomes bank-owned property or real estate-owned property. That happens a lot. I can't tell you how much, but it happens a lot. Now, what happens to an REO property? If the plaintiff buys it, so a couple of things can happen. Very often, what they're going to do is list it with a realtor, specific realtor. There's a few big ones in the area, Michael Kenduk and Todd Jovino. They get a lot of REO properties that go to them. They can also put it on an auction site. So it can go to Xome, that's Xome. It can go to auction.com. It can go to Hubzu. It can go to Hudson and Marshall. It can go to a lot of different places. So a few things can happen, though. Also, very often they're occupied, right? They can be occupied with the owner. They can be occupied with a tenant. They can be occupied with a squatter. And there's a new category called a licensee, which is someone that was allowed to move in there, let's say a friend of the owner, but then just never left. So they were allowed to move in, but they overstayed how long they were allowed to leave. They could be any of those people. And how you serve those people to evict them is different. So also some lenders have actually gotten the properties vacant or gotten them vacant, sometimes they are vacant, and fixed them up and sold them. So the question is, how do you wholesale a property like that? So it's not so simple. Right now, if you buy it at the auction, it's not really an REO property, but you can, if you buy something at an auction, you have to bring a certified check or cash for 10% of it, and you have like 30 days, sometimes 60 days to close on it. You can assign that bid at will. It's easily done. I've done it. So you're the winning bidder. You give you 10% down. If you got it cheap enough that another a fix and flipper or another investor wants it, you can just assign the bid to them. That's an easy way to do it if you get it at the auction. But understand, you're competing at the auction with a lot of people, hundreds of people. Most of them are already thinking about fixing and flipping the property. It's very hard to get properties cheap enough at the auction to wholesale them to another investor, because there's a lot of guys out there that want to just do the fix and flip themselves, and they would bid on it. Now, sometimes you know something at the auctions that they don't know, right? Sometimes you can get inside and they couldn't get inside, and you find that it's in much better condition than everybody thought. That happened to me once. Sometimes you know something, but it's very hard to make money at the auctions. The people there very often have a huge base of retail buyers. They know what a retail buyer will pay. They already have the buyer in mind when they're there. It's hard to compete. So how else can you wholesale an REO property? So what happened in 2008-9 is that a lot of these asset managers, right, which is somebody that manages a huge amount of properties, were selling pools of these loans, a bunch of properties, to buyers. And then if you bought them, you could have bought them at a deep enough discount that you can then sell them off. But it's not so simple for that either, because most asset managers won't talk to you. So some of the easiest ways to, and so let's talk about what happens if it goes to auction. So if I buy something at Hubzu or Zome, it's my air conditioner, then it's very, very hard to wholesale a property, because very often they are not going to allow you to assign their contract, and they're going to write something like you can't flip it for 90 days. So there are some shortcuts. So you can, in effect, buy the property in an LLC and sell the rights to the LLC, sell the interest in the LLC, sell your interest in the LLC to someone else. I've done that. You can wholesale an REO that way. That's a way to get around the no flipping or no assigning clause. But in general, it's pretty difficult to do. And in general, it's going to go straight up to an REO agent, right, a real estate owned agent, who is going to be very difficult to deal with. Most of them are incredibly hard to deal with, right? And I understand that, because they're there to protect the banks. They're not there to help you at all. So you get no feedback from them. You just get multiple offers. What's your highest and best? That's the same crap you get. They don't give you any guidance. And I believe some of them are guilty of some shenanigans where they have preferred people and they give it to them, and there are some shenanigans going on. So if that's the case, it's very hard to wholesale in the REO space. You can fix and flip a property, right? You can buy it at a fix and flip price, but it's not so simple to get it cheap enough to wholesale. So it's hard. Now, I would say that without a doubt, and here's my important tip, you should not be thinking about wholesaling REO properties. What you should be doing is thinking about going direct to seller and locking up properties cheap enough to wholesale to other investors via a direct to seller model. That's what I do for the last 5 years, and I think it's a much better recipe for success in this business. And I've seen people who have tried to do this business trying to buy properties that are listed on MLS. That's a huge mistake. It's very hard to find properties on the MLS that you can wholesale. And I've seen people who try to do it REO. It's also very hard. The real way to be successful at wholesaling, is to go direct to seller. So to market direct to seller, to get a list of people that are potentially more likely to sell for a variety of reasons. It could be problems with them, it could be problems with the property. Property could be vacant, for example. Property could be tax delinquent if you can get a tax delinquent list in your area. And then to basically send them a simple message. If you're interested in selling, I'm interested in buying. That's it. And then, I use mail, phone calls, texting, and RVMs, ringless voicemails. I do use all those things, and I think that those things work. They all work. Anything works, right, if you do it consistently. And that's a much, much better model for success in wholesaling. To try and go about this through wholesale, through REOs is not easy, because, as I said, it's very hard to get the properties cheap enough, and it's very hard to assign. You have two issues here, right? You're dealing with usually a savvy. But the reason why I say not to go in the MLS or to go into REOs is because you're dealing in a red ocean right there. I forgot what book it was, but once it is a red ocean where the sharks ripping up the chum, or a blue ocean where you're not competing with anybody. If you're going after a listed property, everybody can see it. If you're going after an REO, it's probably going to be listed by an agent. Everyone can see it. But if you're going direct to seller, I can tell you most of the time when I speak to a seller, I'm the only one making an offer there. So that's a much better place to be. Not always, but it's a much better place to be. And I would highly recommend that you would adopt, if you're starting, a direct-to-seller model as opposed to an REO model or an MLS model. Unless you have some asset manager who happens to be your friend and he goes, hey, I got all these properties and I'm selling them at 50% discount of what I think they are, then great, right? And ironically, in 2008, 2009, I worked for a mortgage company who actually bought a bunch of those properties from asset managers, because then they were giving them away like crazy. But it's very hard today, really any day, to develop a good enough relationship with an asset manager. They're going to send you any real inventory. And if they do, they're going to send you a huge pool. They're going to tell you to take it all. You're not going to be able to cherry pick. It's not an easy thing to do. So I would highly recommend against trying to wholesale REOs. I would much, much, much more strongly recommend starting a process of marketing to sellers. Now, that's harder. It costs money. You're going to get told to go to hell a lot. There's a lot of rejection. It's a lot of work. But I would say, without a doubt, it's a better model to wholesale. Because there are always going to be sellers who have some kind of problem where you could solve by buying their property, whether it's a time problem, they need to close fast, or they need to close slowly. They just have no place to go, and they don't want to be on a buyer's timeline, or it could be a house problem. Maybe the house can't get a regular mortgage, or it's got open permits, or it's got unpermitted things, or it's got some kind of problem that you can deal with that they don't want to deal with. Or it could be some kind of issue with the seller also. Maybe they just can't afford the property and need to get out quickly, or they inherited the property and they need to get out quickly. There's all kinds of things. But basically, this is not a predatory system. We don't take advantage of people. Everybody knows when they sell a property to us that they can get more money via other means. They sell to us because we provide them certainty and convenience, knowing that it's going to get done, knowing it's going to get done at the price we said, and knowing it's going to get done whenever they want it to be. So that is what we provide. I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in finding out other ways I can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in my course, go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. If you're interested in coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on any media platform, please give me a thumbs up. Those likes really help me. And please keep the comments coming. I really appreciate the comments. I don't always know what to say. I go live 5 times a week, so I'm happy to answer your comments if it's a simple answer, or if it's a topic that I've covered recently. Maybe I'll just send you a video, or if it's something new, I might just do a new video on it. So thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it.